Greetings and welcome, listeners, to Superb Diamond Range, episode 10. We have a special guest who we're very honoured and pleased to have in Mark Passio. Over to you, Diamond.
Okay, well, thank you very much for agreeing to come on our show, Mark. And it's a great honour and privilege because this year and the tail end of last year we came across you and came across your amazing work, what you've been doing for the truth movement. And also, you know, we can see that you've helped many people because you have a podcast yourself and a website. And we would like to share some time with you, if that's okay with you, just to hear some of your thoughts.
Absolutely. It's really great to be here. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for inviting me onto your show.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Yeah, so we'd like to start, Mark, with just to sort of go into a bit of your history, sort of how you sort of came to the point that you're at now, sort of where it all kind of began for you. Just a little brief history on yourself, if you don't mind, for any listeners that might be unfamiliar.
Sure, no problem. Well, in my youth, I really kind of accepted a lot of the dogmatic belief systems that I was fed by my family. I kind of was raised by a traditional Roman Catholic family in South Philadelphia. Philadelphia, for people who may be listening from overseas, is on the east coast of the United States in the state of Pennsylvania. And I kind of accepted these dogmatic beliefs without much questioning as they were fed to me by my family, because they're kind of like the type of people who don't really question the status quo. They just believe what their parents told them, and then they teach it to their children. And because I lacked a lot of knowledge back then, especially the knowledge of astrotheology, to put religion into context, had I had the knowledge of astrotheology then, I would have understood what religion was and what it was all about. But lacking that knowledge, I couldn't put all that religious indoctrination into any kind of perspective or framework. So when I started to question it and realized that I was basically being fed lies as a mechanism of control, unknowingly, even by my parents and their parents, my skepticism or questioning, I guess you could say, turned into extreme anger. And I acted out upon that by trying to find the exact antithesis of the belief system into which I had been indoctrinated, and I found it in the form of Satanism. I gravitated to the dark occult and specifically to Satanism. And when I became involved in Satanism and started espousing the satanic ideology, which we could talk about later if you want,
Sure.
through writing and music, my work was actually recognized by the founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey. The Church of Satan is probably the largest satanic front organization, as I call it, in the world. It connects in with the real satanic hierarchy, but I look at it and explain to people that it is a psychological vetting and filtration system for psychopaths, and to pull them up into the ranks of the real dark occult and the real satanic network and hierarchy. I didn't know that at the time, so when I became involved in the Church of Satan through LaVey, I was actually eventually appointed to the rank of priest in this organization by LaVey himself. My involvement grew. I began to become involved in grottos in this tri-state area in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. And as my involvement grew and I connected with other Satanists in this area, I began to realize that this was not just an isolated group of individuals working with some occult principles or knowledge for their own purposes, that it was a eclectic array of people from every walk of life and every single social institution on the face of the earth, including politics, banking, law, the military, law enforcement, entertainment, medicine, education, technology, you name the field, you name it. There were Satanists that were involved in positions of power at every single social institution. And they were not working separately. They were working together. They were people of influence and power working together toward a common goal, and that goal was to increase their own collective power at the expense of everyone else's freedom.
That's shocking.
It did not matter who they were going to step on to get this done. They understood how the psyche works. They understood mind control techniques, and they were going to use them to their advantage over anybody that they needed to increase their personal power, their group's power. And I sensed that they were working through a higher up chain of command. At that time, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that hierarchy until I did later research after disconnecting with these groups. And I'll explain briefly how I did that. When I became aware that I had become involved at a very low level. I am not trying to tell anyone, and never have made this claim, that I was involved in any kind of a high up level. Absolutely not. I was involved in what I admittedly call the Girl Scout level of Satanism. This is the level that interfaces with the public, and it's a psychological filtration system. Okay? And this is low level. All right? Now, the people I was involved with, I'm sure that they went up to higher levels of this hierarchy, of this network. My level was quite low that I was involved in. And even at that level, I could see that this was an organized syndicate, again, working, against human freedom. And these groups, when I realized they were a psychological vetting and filtration system for a larger network that was working toward the slavery of humanity, my conscience would not allow me to go any further with this. I decided I'm going to pull back my involvement. I'm going to get out of this. I'm not going to, continue my affiliation with any of these groups or people, and I'm going to start to expose it if I can.
Very good.
When I did that, people would think, well, hey, I'm sure they were extremely upset and threatened you and told you to stay silent and, told you that horrible things would happen to you if you started speaking out. That is exactly what did not happen, okay? Nothing like that occurred when I expressed that I was uncomfortable with what was being done, that I didn't want to be involved with it anymore, that I saw things differently than them and did not want to see human freedom destroyed. It wasn't like people like in those groups insisted that I stay involved or made any kind of threats. They were completely unconcerned. That was their attitude. Absolutely unconcerned with anything that I could possibly do. As a matter of fact, I recall being told, and words, paraphrasing, one of the people involved took me aside and said to me, you think that you're going to be able to explain to people how this works or how, what we do works. They said, do your worst, okay? Go out and do whatever you think you're going to do to explain to people what's going on. And good luck banging your head against a brick wall for the rest of your natural life until the day you die.
Well,
because they said we have people's minds so completely, totally owned that if we came forward and told them what we are doing, they wouldn't accept that truth from us. And we are the people who are actually doing it. It reminds me of a Paul Joseph Goebbels quote from the Third Reich in Hitler's Third Reich in Germany. He said Goebbels actually made this statement to the Jewish population in Germany during the Holocaust, the years of the Holocaust was taking place, and he said, the more we do to you, the less you believe we are doing it. That's by Paul Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi minister of propaganda. And this was kind of like it almost resonated just like that. Like that, this is what they were saying. They were saying we have people so totally owned and controlled in the mind that even if we told them what we were doing, they still wouldn't believe it from us. And, at that point, I did separate from these groups. I turned my life around. I went into a whole lot of research, obviously, because I had lacked knowledge, in a big way, and knew that I needed to really start to understand what I had become involved with and what was really going on in the world. And that led to What on Earth is Happening. Years later, years down the line, it took me personally almost another 7 to 8 years at least of deprogramming and deconditioning from that worldview, from that entire way of seeing the world, of looking at life in general. And, that was hard, introspective, personal work that took years of my life to do, to come out of that mindset and then start to teach the material that I've been teaching as part of What on Earth is Happening. So that's my essential basic background story.
It's brilliant. Yeah. So it must have been whenever you'd sort of changed and sort of, went a different direction, was anybody that you were involved with at the time, were they sort of trying to make contact with you or trying to bring you back in, or was it just
not. Absolutely not. Nothing. It was as if I ceased to exist.
Wow.
And like I said, it was almost like tap on the shoulder or on the back and say, "Now get out of here, punk." And you think we need you? See ya.
Gosh.
Just like that. It's like, if you don't want to be involved with the real movers and shakers of the world, there's the door, and don't let it hit you in the ass on the way out. That was the attitude. And no one ever made any contact to try to pull me back into any of those grottos or any involvement in Satanism at all, whatsoever.
That's amazing.
Yep.
That's amazing.
So would you say, while you were there, did you learn the astrotheology?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
You learned that yourself?
Yes. They don't talk about that at all. At all. They're there to put you in that mindset and then groom you up into positions of power in their hierarchy to do their agenda. You're like a foot soldier. And yeah, they have an ideology that they share with you. It's what I call a poisoned ideology, and we could even talk about the tenets that they teach and espouse and propagate. But they don't really teach any esoteric wisdom teachings.
Right.
They are giving to their contingency, to their lower level foot soldiers, if you will. It's what I call it's an intermediate variant of the ideology that their owners have. See, I look at Satanism as having 3 levels, and I'm calling, this is like a banner term that I'm using, Satanism. We're really talking about dark occultism here in general. Now, I would say a higher level, a higher form of this is what I call dark Luciferianism. And that is willfully and knowingly propagating this worldview out to other people. But you have the knowledge at the higher level of how natural law and the laws of the universe and the psyche really operate. That's dark Luciferianism. Those are people with the knowledge, and they're using it as a weapon. The intermediate level is kind of like this level of Satanism that I was involved with. Okay, it's an interface with the public. They give people a variant of this mindset or ideology that the higher ups have, but they don't really teach them any real esoteric knowledge, or certainly not about natural law. All that knowledge came later, but I recognize that these people at the higher levels have it. Okay, because just from snippets and conversations I was privy to and speaking to people, it's they understand how it works, and they are actively insulating themselves from the consequences of natural law by getting other people to do their dirty work for them. This intermediate layer, which is Satanism, LaVeyan Satanism a la the Temple of Set, the Order of the Evil Eye, the Church of Lucifer, other organizations like that. This is like this intermediate level that I would just group under the banner term Satanism. And again, that's a lower level variant of what these higher level dark occultists understand. Then at the very level of the public, you have what I call mini-me Satanism. It's a watered down version that could rightly be called egoism, and it's what the public, it's the mindset that the public is trapped in. And it's Satanism, but they don't even know that it's Satanism. It's we can touch on the tenets, and then people will understand a little bit more readily what I mean by this. The four tenets, and again, this isn't according to them. It's not the exact tenets that they'll say that they teach or that they propagate. This is my, I guess you could say, boiling down of what this ideology really is. It's Satanism in basic tenets in a nutshell. There's four of them, and the first is, and the highest is self-preservation, as being the highest aspiration of the individual. In other words, survival of the individual comes first before anything else, most of all morality, including morality. Doesn't matter what you have to do to get a leg up or power or leverage over other people or other individuals. You do it, and that's considered the highest value, so to speak. It's not a value at all. It's really a detriment, but they consider that the highest value that anybody could have. And as I say these things, you'll recognize that the public in general is in this mindset.
Okay? Yes, definitely.
So the second tenet is moral relativism. This is the notion, the ideology that there is no such thing as objective right or wrong morally. There's no such thing as objective morality. All right? It's all relative and it's all subjective. What is right for me is what is right. What is wrong for me is what is wrong. Okay? If I end up in a better situation and position, even if someone else gets hurt or harmed in the process, well, then that's good and that's right. That's what's good and moral for me to take action on and to do. If I end up with less power, less influence, less resources, whatever, okay, then that's wrong. That's not the right road to go down. It doesn't matter if it results in greater equality for other people or learning or evolutionary development for the species. It doesn't make a difference. If I have to take a hit, that is wrong, and that's what's bad for me. This is called moral relativism. And again, most people are in this mindset. It's what I call the mini-me version of Satanism. It's the version that is propagated and trickled down to the public, and they don't even understand that it's Satanism. They just think like this by default because of how they're conditioned. And again, they're Satanists without even recognizing that they subscribe to the satanic ideology. And like I said, I'd like to call it egoism, because that kind of paints in people's minds a better idea of what it really is. It's the worship of the ego. Okay, I come first, nobody else matters. Okay, the third tenet of the satanic ideology is social Darwinism. And, you could see how this comes out of the idea that self-preservation is the highest value and moral relativism is true, that there's no such thing as objective right and wrong. Well, now we get social Darwinism, which comes out of macrobiological Darwinian evolution, that postulated the notion that the fittest survive, and the animal that's the most ruthless and has the sharpest teeth and claws comes out on top and propagates their gene pool. This is then taken into the social realm through social Darwinism, that the most ruthless human beings that are willing to step on anybody else to get their way and impose their will are the ones who rule the roost and come out on top of the social pecking order, of the human pecking order. And people look at this as the quote-unquote natural order. How many people out there have that mindset? Oh, the people who are the most ruthless and willing to do anything to get their way, they belong at the top. Maybe they have better genes than other people. Maybe they're genetically superior somehow, and they belong there. That's the natural order. That's the way of things. That's the way it's always been, the way it is now, and the way it always should and must be. So many people are in this sick, poisoned mindset, and they don't even understand it's satanic. That is a satanic mindset. That's a satanic ideology and point of view, and that people are trapped in this. The reason we're not making any inroads into real freedom is people are trapped in a satanic mindset. The fourth and final general tenet of Satanism is eugenics, and again we can see the linear progression, the downward slope from self-preservation as the highest value in life, the highest aspiration that a human being should aspire to moral relativism, to social Darwinism, inevitably leads to eugenics. Eugenics is the idea that a certain class of individuals, some type of technocratic class or bureaucratic class, should have the right to decide who gets to propagate their genes and ultimately give birth to another generation of people and who doesn't. In other words, who gets to live and who gets to die. It's people essentially playing God and deciding who is actually going to propagate themselves. And this is carried out through many soft means. Soft eugenics is done through food and water and air poisoning, and then you get things taking this to its full conclusion, its full dark conclusion. You get things like racial and ethnic cleansing and genocide. That's where eugenics goes. So that's the basic tenets of Satanism. Almost all the Satanists that I ever had any dealings with strictly adhere to these four basic tenets, this entire worldview as I've laid it out here according to these four tenets. And what I would suggest is it isn't just them that think this way. The general public is indoctrinated with this general dark, poisonous worldview. They think this way and don't even understand that it is Satanism to which they are subscribing. And when you try to explain that to them, they want to lash back and say, I'm not a Satanist, because they have a problem with that word. They think of Satanism, they think Satanism is something completely other than what it is. It has nothing to do with most people think it is. They have this Hollywood movie idea of what Satanism is. And I'm not telling you that a lot of that doesn't happen. A lot of those trappings and that way, that aesthetic doesn't happen in Satanism. Okay, I'm not saying that. Those types of rituals, they do happen at some levels of Satanism. But I'm saying that's not generally what Satanism is as an ideology. It's an ideology, it's a worldview, it's a way of seeing the world, it's a way of seeing yourself and other people in it. It's a mentality, okay?
Right.
And people don't understand that. So I like to call what people are trapped in egoism, and then explain to them that's the same as Satanism, because maybe they'll hear the word ego a little bit differently than they'll hear the word Satan. They have a connotation that they're going to hear the word Satan in, and that's going to actually insulate people from understanding what this worldview, what this ideology really is, because they're going to be thinking that mental projection of what they think it is, their connotation is already in their mind. So to help get people out of that and explain to them what this really is and what they are trapped in, I like to liken this to the term that I just call egoism, the religion of the ego, because that's really what Satanism is. And Satanists make no bones about that. That's what it is. They say that they are the worshipers of the human ego. And as long as we're in this mentality of me, it nothing else matters except my comfort, my survival, my pleasure, and rights don't exist. Right and wrong are subjective. I get to make them up as I go along. They're not objective. They don't exist in nature. And social Darwinism is the way things should be. And ultimately, certain people have to be done away with. So I believe in eugenics. As long as people are in that mindset, freedom is impossible. Yeah. It is actually not possible to manifest if that is the general mindset of people of this world. And unfortunately, I would say largely people think that way. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say over 2/3 of people in the world, that's their mindset. And I'm probably underestimating it.
Mark, would you say that the way the whole system's set up from, say, birth to, you've got school, so you've got to being top of the class at school, pressure, right, bullying, you've obviously, then you get a job, so people want to get a better position, move up the career ladder and stuff like that. The whole thing is set up for the ego and for the, pat on the back kind of,
That's it. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's like you can't get out of it because that's the whole treadmill that you're on. It seems like you're just going on and on to that sort of stage, really.
Well, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, unless you do not go to school, because you're trained that way from school, and that is what the school is designed for, to practice Satanism by the sound of it.
In many ways, that's definitely true. I would say it's designed to teach people the general overarching worldview that the purpose of existence on this planet, the purpose of human life on this planet, is to serve the self. That's generally what these institutions that we are put into from the time we're born, are designed to get people to think. This is service to self mentality, okay? That all life is about is what can I get for me? How can I move up into a better position? See, most people would want to be these people at the top, so-called top. They're not at the top of anything. They're at the bottom of a sewer is where they're really at, psychologically, mentally, and spiritually, okay? But most people would trade places with them. They would say, oh, wait, this Satanist, this dark occultist who has a total black heart and black mind, they own a Fortune 500 business and they make $1 billion a year. Oh, I'd love to be that person. I would love to trade places with that person because their mentality is all that matters is money, all that matters is power, all that matters is your comfort.
Yeah,
that's their value system. Yes.
Yeah, they bought the lie, haven't they, from the beginning?
That's right.
They think they've done well, but as we know, they're being played. Basically, all of them.
Completely.
All the ones that. Yeah.
They're playing themselves by thinking that way, by subscribing to that worldview, and people will say, oh well, what would you rather be? Completely poor? Well, you know what? I'd rather be poor of the fake money. The fake one eye, moan eye, okay, and have the real thing, which is knowledge of how things really work, knowledge of self, knowledge of how I work, knowledge of morality, and true conscience, true common sense. I would rather have that than have all the fake money in the world, because you could pile up a mountain of something that's fake and never come up and never have it be equivalent to something that's real. So I'd rather have the real thing, personally. I tell people I may not have $1 in my wallet, but I have so much money that it's unbelievable. Because I have the real money, the real one eye, the real spiritual vision, knowledge of the truth, knowledge of self. That's what my value system is about. And it ultimately has morality at its heart, the objective knowledge, the knowledge of the objective difference between right and wrong. And then putting that into practice and living that. See, how many parents out there, that you'll ask them, what do you want for your child? And most of them will say, well, I want security for my child. Meaning, I want them to have a lot of money so that they don't have to want for physical things, physical needs. And this is a satanic ideology. You're only worried about the physical aspect of the being. Now, I don't have children, but if I did, the thing that I would want most of all for my child is to grow up to be a moral being, to definitively know in their mind, heart, and soul the objective difference between right and wrong, and have the courage and will to choose the right action over the wrong action in every moment of their lives. That's what I would want for my children. How many parents would you even ever hear say a statement even remotely similar to something like I just said there?
Not
Hardly
even 1%.
ever.
Not even one.
No, not even 1%.
So this ideology that we're talking about is service to self. That's what Satanism. If you want to just sum up Satanism in a total one soundbite, Satanism is the ideology of service to self from cradle to grave. You only care about yourself. Now, we have to move beyond that to. There's two levels that go beyond this. All right, people who have gotten onto the spiritual path somewhat will recognize one of these layers, and they generally tend to try to live one of these higher levels of consciousness, and that is the first one is service to others. Okay, we have to get out of our mindset, realize we're all in this situation here on Earth together. We all have the same basic needs as human beings. Okay. We all generally want the same things insofar as that we want freedom, peace, prosperity, living in harmony with each other without violence. Most people will say that they want those things.
Yeah.
Okay? And, we really are one living family here on this living planet. That there's only one planet that we're living on right now, and we're all here together. Now, in that sense, yes, we are one. I'm not saying that idea that we're all one in the sense that a lot of the New Agers say it, that we're all one, so anything that happens doesn't matter. That's absolutely not true. What happens on this planet absolutely matters. And there is such a thing as good and there is such a thing as evil, and we need to know the difference and have discernment to understand the difference between those two dynamics that are taking place here on our planet. But in a general sense, when we realize our general oneness, then we move into the modality, the ideology of the philosophy of service to others, that we can't live our lives just about ourselves. Now, I'm not saying live your life for other people at the expense of yourself either. It has to be a balance. You have to do what you can do, while and don't destroy yourself in the process, but put your knowledge out there for other people. If you could help in physical terms, then do that too. Use your resources, and in general, just extend your care outward from yourself and your own immediate family to into a global sense. To look at the whole global situation and say and understand and see that humanity is all in this together, and we have to care about everyone. That's what I would call service to self mentality. And it's where we need to go to get beyond it's service to others mentality. And it's where we need to go to get beyond service to self mentality. But there is a layer entirely beyond even service to others mentality. Okay?
Because there was something, Mark, that you mentioned once in one of your videos, and I remember you saying that, obviously if people are going to change, then we kind of need to all change. Obviously it can't be just a few. It has to be kind of everybody awakening. And I remember at the time thinking, it will only take a few, and then, things are going to change. It's going to be like a snowball effect. But when you said that statement, it was really, I realized how big a thing it would be for it to happen, but, also how difficult it would be because the way that people are so brainwashed and conditioned. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that, why you think the people aren't waking up.
Yes, and I could go back to this other mentality that we need to get to that goes even beyond service to self in a moment, but I'll address what you're talking about here. This is this New Age variant, or this New Age notion that it's only going to take a little bit of people to change to make a global mass change happen, and that nothing could be further from the truth. See, this is the New Age deception that we are creating our reality individually. And they teach this watered down and inaccurate version of the laws of attraction. The real laws of attraction are natural law. How morality works and how our decision-making process to choose behaviors ultimately brings us the consequences that we then experience in the manifested world, based upon whether we chose right action over wrong action, once we know definitively the difference between right and wrong. So once we have conscience, then we act upon that knowledge. Conscience is knowledge. People don't think of it that way, but that's what conscience is. Okay? It's knowledge of the difference between right and wrong, and the word conscience means common knowledge. Con in Latin means together or with, and then or common, and then science comes from the Latin sciere, which means to know or to understand. You put them together to know together. Common knowledge, common sense. That's what conscience is. The knowledge of right and wrong. Then the exercise of conscience is acting upon that knowledge. It's taking the right action over the wrong action in a willful sense once you have that knowledge of conscience. So, see, what I'm getting to here is that we create our reality in the aggregate based on our understanding or lack of understanding of natural law. Okay? People think we're all creating our reality individually. This is how the New Age teaches it. And that's not true. The reality, we are creating our reality in the aggregate. Humanity is creating the reality that humanity experiences in the aggregate. Meaning, as individual choices and decision-making processes come together, they are aggregated. A whole society is generally behaving a certain way and putting certain actions into manifestation. And so the entire society is going to become a certain way based on that behavior. That's what determines what a society is like, the aggregate quality of behavior of that society. So we create our reality in the aggregate with all the other people in our society, not individually. This is something the New Age movement and its subscribers and believers have completely wrong. And they don't want to understand because it's very difficult, and it's the word I'm looking for is that it's very disheartening in many ways to understand how the laws of attraction really work to bring about change, because you're realizing what you're really up against. It's not that, just I have to change and then the reality will change. That seems easy in the mind. See, this is why the New Age movement teaches this to people, because they want to teach people what they want to hear. They want to tell people what they want to hear, what other people want to hear. That makes people very receptive to their message, and then that makes money flow to their organizations. Because when people are told what they want to hear, then they get behind that, and then they pour resources behind that. If I wanted to make money, fake money, I would be up here telling people what they want to hear. I don't do that. I tell people the very uncomfortable and difficult to process and understand truths that they need to know if they're really going to understand how change is created. So this idea that it's only going to take a few people is New Age nonsense. They call it a quantum shift, or a paradigm shift, a quantum paradigm shift. This means, in a large-scale sense in a society, okay, that people's minds have changed from one worldview to another worldview. That's what a paradigm shift means. Paradigm means a worldview, a way of seeing reality. And for a quantum paradigm shift to take place, the word quantum in the Latin language means an amount. That's what quantum means, amount. All right? When light moves in from place to place, it moves in quanta. Quanta are packets or amounts, okay, like waves or particles. All right, so when we talk about the word quantum or a quantum shift in our worldview, that means that a certain amount is required, is necessary to tilt the scales and create that tipping point, that critical mass tipping point that we need. If we don't reach that quantum amount, it will not tip over, and that amount is not small. I would say that amount usually, and again, if we had to quantify this, meaning put an amount on it, a number on it, my best guesstimate, I would say it's an educated guesstimate, would probably be over 1/2. You would at least need more than 50% of people to send a quantum paradigm shift into manifestation, into effect. I would say with something as difficult as we're working with now, we may need more than that number, and we may be looking at something like 2/3 of people may need to change their mentality. Because I think 2/3 who are deeply in the satanic ideology now, and that's what's holding the dynamic on this planet in place. So I would say where we're at in the way that it's deeply calcified and entrenched in the modern day, I would say we probably have to get up to a number of over 60%, or maybe even a little bit more, to get this dynamic to actually tilt and go critical mass. And again, that's a very conservative estimate, and a lot of people will hear that and be horrified by that number because they're being told this lie that it's only going to take 2 or 3% of people to make the rest of the world change their mind. And it's not going to be that easy. It's not going to happen that way. I hate to burst people's bubble, but you're seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, and you're believing New Age nonsense if that's what you think. I'm just coming out and just saying it openly and honestly as I see it. This is going to take, I think, minimum of a half and half balance, over a 50% change, but I think it's going to take over 2/3 of people to stop subscribing to the satanic and the egoism worldview, and to come over to a worldview of service to others. And most of all, to tie this back into what I was saying before about where the other level of consciousness goes to, once you get to an understanding of service to others, you have to take it beyond that, and you have to go to service to truth mentality. That's the ultimate worldview paradigm shift that we need to arrive at, is to understand this isn't even just about, it's not certainly not about just serving our own egos and ourselves, and it's not even just about serving other people and helping other people to make this profound shift in consciousness and this paradigm shift. It is about serving truth. That's what it's ultimately about at the highest level. That's a even higher level of consciousness than service to others. Service to others is an intermediate level, and you have a desire to help other people at first, but then you go up higher than that and you realize this is about truth being objective and existing independently from humanity. And it's about us being servants of that higher force. I mean, let's just call it what it is. If we wanted to, talk about a creator of the universe or a creative power, a higher power in nature, a higher power in the universe, I think there could be no better. People will call that God, but I think there could be no better likening or no better term that we could give to that higher force than truth. God is truth, essentially. And that's the force that I serve. I serve truth, above all else, above serving other people and certainly above serving myself. That's the level of consciousness that we need to get to as a species, to understand that we need to be servants of truth. And there's so few people that are at that level of consciousness. I mean, it's paltry. The numbers are paltry. We have so much work to do to get to that level that it's going to be a very difficult and uphill battle at times. But that's where we need to go.
Do you think, Mark, that it could be like a generational thing where, like sort of the people that are in the system now learn from their mistakes and try to bring their children up a different way, and maybe not follow the same path they did? I know it's not always easy, but right. That could be the way to kind of get things going a bit. But as we are right now, because many people are only just finding out these things in the last 5, 6, 8 years, 10
right.
years ago.
Sure.
I'm just wondering if that could be something that could make it a bit quicker. But
yeah, I'll give you my take on that. I think the older generations, there are some people who are getting it and coming around. And again, I don't want to sound like ageist or anything in this. I'm not. I look at that. I look at just people separating themselves on, age and sex and class and religion and politics. That's all just divide and conquer strategies, But if I had to give my honest take on this, I look at the hope is in some of the younger generations. Not to say that, again, some people who are, let's say beyond 50 years in age, a lot of them don't get this. Many do. But if we're talking about large numbers, large scale numbers, the dynamics globally, I think that some of the most brainwashed people are from 50 years old on. Maybe even from 40 years old on. I'm going to be 40 this year. My birthday is in August, and I'll be turning 40. I'm 39 right now. So I look at the generations from around now 20 years old to my age, around 40, as probably being the people who are the most awake and are the most somehow open to accepting the truth. I don't know why that is. Maybe we were hit with some deep spiritual allegorical content in movies and television shows that we grew up with, and books and things like that. Maybe it's just that there wasn't as much of a chemical barrage going on. Or you look at older people; they grew up on television. The TV was brand new during their existence, and even before that, you had the mainstream media propaganda of newspapers and radio that had no balance or no challenge from alternative media like we have today, and like we've had since basically the internet has existed. So, my take on this is that really the concentration of awake people is probably in my generation or even a little bit younger. Because they're starting to use this new media in proper ways of actually availing themselves of knowledge and information that the mainstream doesn't cover, the mainstream media doesn't cover, and actually insulates people from to the extent that they can. So The other part of it is I think that once somebody's been alive for so long and they're attached to a worldview, it's very, very, very difficult for them to say three words that is the most powerful phrase that can ever be uttered by a living human being. And those three words are, I was wrong. That can be very difficult once somebody has subscribed to a worldview for so long that they'll just stay committed to it for the sake of staying committed to it, because they're so entrenched in the egoic mindset that they can't bring themselves around to the realization consciously and speak that to other people that they have been duped, that they have been fooled, that they have been conned. And, they would rather, it's like this death before dishonor type thing. Rather than admit to themselves, hey, I was conned. Okay, yes, that may mean I wasn't acting honorably and bought into a lie, but I can remake myself in the present moment by admitting that I was fooled. And now I could turn over a new leaf, and I can regain honor and start living truly according to natural law and develop true self-respect for myself and completely change my worldview. That's possible, but the ego is what's in the way.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the ego is the problem. It's so entrenched, it's so calcified that they would probably rather choose suffering unto death rather than say those three powerful words, that 3-word phrase, I was wrong. And again, that's the phrase I had to say thousands and thousands of times in my turnaround, in my quote unquote recovery out of this poison mindset, this poison worldview. I can't tell you how many times I had to say that phrase, and I still say it. So we're always learning new things, learning and growing and coming into new information, and a lot of times you have to continue to say that. Even once you do come out of that general dark worldview, none of us have it all figured out. None of us know all the answers. And you have to constantly humble yourself. And when new information does come to light that you lacked before and it challenges what you thought you know, you have to be willing to say, I was wrong, and then accept the truth and go where it leads.
You're not sure,
Definitely.
Mark. You're probably aware of the free man and people starting up their own communities
Yes.
to get away from the system, which is slowly happening here in the UK, which is pretty good.
Right.
It's quite big in the US and Canada, most Commonwealth countries.
Right.
And I think it would be quite good for most of the world to do it, to live away from the system, trade between each other, no money, doing real work, helping each other instead of supporting a system which is failing.
Sure. The issue with that is that there's so few people that are of that mindset collectively as a whole that they can be scattered. And it's like, in the U.S., what a lot of people who are freedom-minded are doing, that we have this thing called the Free State Project. And it's a bunch of people who have committed to moving to one particular state within the United States. The state is New Hampshire. It's in New England, and the northeast section of the United States. So that's something that has taken on a lot of grassroots support here. But that's the only issue that I see with this is a lot of times people are just connected to these movements through the internet, and not a geographical, physical location. So that's how it is here. It's people of the freedom mindset in general. I look at them. We're scattered to the winds here in the United States. I mean, there's no 100% active freedom community geographically. It's just individual people living in isolated pockets and isolated little communities with small amounts of friends that then they come together in groups, and have meetings and meetups, activist groups, marches, protests, etc., which is all very healthy, and that's getting the word out to other people. Interacting with other people is the main thing here. Not staying silent and speaking your mind and putting these ideas forward in unapologetic ways that you're not ashamed to put out there. You have to put it out there unabashedly, in a way that you're proud of, and speak this to people with courage. And when you do that, then they're going to resonate with that, because they're going to see that you're talking from a place of knowledge. You're speaking from a place of courage, and that's going to resonate inherently and intuitively with other people. So it's all about sharing the information in a widely available way, and in a way that, again, is done in an unapologetic and courageous way. So I think we need more communities like that coming together physically, with a lot of people in them. But again, the numbers are still low right now. We have a lot of work to do to spread this message and get it out there to other people, so that they become interested and get online and on board with it, for sure.
Mark,
Yes.
in your own life, obviously the friends that you would have grown up with, did you sort of lose any friends along the way because of your worldview and the way that you think? Did anybody didn't agree with you or see eye to eye, and did you lose anybody along the way? Like, for example, I have a lot of friends that are really into the system, and they don't subscribe to my worldview, and I'm still friends with them, but we just don't talk about these type of things because it just doesn't go very far. I just wondered if you had any experiences like that with your own friends or family, even.
Sure, great question. Definitely, yes. The answer is yes. I'll explain a little bit. When I started getting into the satanic ideology, you gravitate away from a lot of the people that don't think like that, and then you get involved in these types of communities and you meet new people. It's kind of like your level of consciousness is going to dictate the kind of people that you're going to be around and exposed to. And that's kind of what happened when I got involved in Satanism. And then when I got out of it, those people went away from my life, and I severed deliberately, and in one sense, and in another sense just didn't gravitate toward people like that anymore. And there were some people who were just consistent throughout the whole thing, that just lifelong friends, of course, that stayed around or I stayed in touch with. That happened too. But when I started getting involved in the truth, the truth about natural law and morality and freedom, and the nature of the world and the human condition, and then I started being vocal about that and explaining it wherever I was, a whole lot of people dropped off the map.
Wow.
That will alienate you way more than Satanism will alienate you. Being into Satanism, not that many people were completely alienating me, or I wasn't completely alienating them. It was just like, well, here's how he thinks. I know he's like that, and whatever. It's almost looked at as it's not that bad to be a Satanist, because most people think like that. If you explain what you're really about as a Satanist, people aren't horrified. They're like, oh, I generally think like that too. That's what I got anyway, growing up. Being involved in this from the time I was 17 and 18 years old until, I guess my late 20s almost. Again, most people did not immediately alienate me upon understanding I was a Satanist. More so, people are alienating and drop away. They drop away like flies when they know that you're anti-government, when they know that you believe that there's such a thing, when you know there's such a thing as objective morality, and most people aren't in any way exhibiting conscience, true conscience. When you start being vocal about that, again, people liken this to religion in many ways, and they'll say, he's becoming religious. This has nothing to do with religion. I'm against all forms of religion, by the way. I think religion is what has held back humanity from making forward progress. Religion, as a term, means to hold back. Literally. It comes from the Latin relegare. Relegare, the verb in Latin, means to hold back or to thwart from forward progress. Literally, the word religion comes from that. There is one true religion as far as I'm concerned, and that's truth. It doesn't even need to be looked at as a religion. See, that's the positive connotation of religion. The positive definition is to reunite. Well, what does truth do? It reunites us with the universe. It reunites us with God. It reunites us with who we really are. It reunites us with self-knowledge. It reunites us with the living, dynamic intelligence that underlies all things. That's what the truth does. That's what a real religion does. Everything else is an imposter. Everything else is a fake.
Mark?
Yeah.
Would you be able to talk to us about natural law? Because I've heard you speak about it before, but just to sort of let our listeners hear a little bit more about it, because we're all familiar with common law and we've heard about inherent rights, and I don't know how natural law fits in with that. I just want to hear your view on it.
Sure. Okay, so natural law goes beyond common law. Okay, it goes beyond any of man's ideas of law. We're not talking about law. Let's differentiate these two basic bodies of information. Anything having to do with how man thinks of law or institutes quote-unquote law on the face of the earth is based in the notion of authority vested in man in some way. No matter who it's invested in, it's vested in humankind. This is an illusion in all of its forms. There is no such thing as authority vested in humanity. Humanity has no authority. Never did, never will. Okay? There is no such thing as authority vested in human beings. All right? The only authority that does exist is vested in the creator of the universe. That's the only authority that exists anywhere in the three-dimensional space-time continuum that we call the universe, or the multiverse, however you want to look at it. Okay? That force put natural law into existence. So we could delineate these two concepts by calling man's law in whatever its forms as lowercase l law, or just simply man's law. And then if we're talking about natural law, or just calling it law with a capital L, law capital L, or capital L, capital A, capital W, all caps, to add that emphasis, that bold face, typeface, and all uppercase. All right, we're talking about inherent law to creation. So it's the same thing as if we were talking about the law of gravity. The law of gravity has nothing to do with man. Would it matter? Would anything that man could possibly do affect the existence of gravitation in the universe? There is nothing man could do to take that law out of creation. It exists. We are bound by it. We can counteract it for a time through technology, okay? But essentially that law is still in place. It is still in place as long as we're in the three-dimensional space-time continuum that we call the universe. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about law. Now, the umbrella term that I use as natural law, quote unquote, natural law, means specifically this. The word natural, it's been hijacked, and I was beginning to call this because so many people have a bastardized understanding of what the word natural really means, and we can get into that briefly. That I was beginning to call this body of universal laws that I call natural law, universal spiritual law. And you could call it that. It's cosmic law. It's universal law. It's spiritual law that exists and operates everywhere in the universe, not put into effect or in place by mankind or any other three-dimensional beings at all. Okay? So the word natural comes from the ancient Egyptian language. All right, natural comes from the Egyptian word netter, N-T-R, if we are translating it out of Old Coptic Egyptian. Okay, N-T-R, or if we transliterate it into English, most people would spell it N-E-T-E-R. Netter means spirit or God. Okay, so and then the suffix al, all. When we add that in onto a word, and this comes from the ancient Arabic languages, all right, the ancient Sanskrit and other Middle Eastern languages. When we add al onto anything, it means of or related to, or having to do with the essence of. That's what al means as a suffix. So we put them together, neter al, having to do with the essence of the spirit, having to do with the essence of God. Okay? That's what natural means. And everything in the world is natural. This is the body of God. The three-dimensional space-time continuum that we call the universe is the body of the creator of the universe. All right? We are but cells in that body, that one thing that is the everything. All right? And that's what natural means. It means that it is inherent to the creation. That's all it means. It means that it is already there. It is pre-existing. It exists, and there's nothing that you can do about it. It doesn't matter if you understand it. It doesn't matter if you like it. It doesn't matter if you agree with it. It doesn't matter if you don't want it to be. It is. It is that which is. That's what natural means. And then law. Let's look at the basic definition of that. It means an existing condition or an inherent condition in the universe that is both binding and immutable. Binding means it has an effect. So it's existing. There's nothing you can do to take it out of effect. Okay? It already exists. It was there before you were here. It will be here after you are gone. All right? You didn't put it into effect. It's non-man-made. That's the other quality of law. Non-man-made. I would say non-made by any life forms. It is made by the whatever you want to look at as the creator of the universe. I don't care what you see that force as. It's made by a higher intelligence, a higher force, a higher power. And it is in effect and binding. It means it doesn't make a difference whether you understand it or don't. You are affected by its existence, its presence. And then it is immutable. That's the third quality of a law. So it's non-man-made, binding, and immutable. Immutable means it cannot be changed. Nothing you ever do will ever change that this is in effect. And that's what natural law is. So we put them together, right? We have the body of laws that is non-man-made, binding, and immutable, and spiritual. Okay, that's what natural law is. It's spiritual dynamics, governing dynamics in the spiritual or unseen realm that ultimately govern the consequences of the behavior of intelligent beings. All right, that's what natural law does. It governs the behavior of beings and brings to us the quality of our experience that we are going to actually be in and interact in, that experience. The quality of that is going to be determined by how we operate within the parameters of these laws through our decision-making processes that lead to our behaviors. So we're going to make decisions based on our understanding of how these laws operate, then we're going to act, and then we're going to receive a manifestation as a result of that behavior, and that is ultimately governed by these dynamics known as natural law. Now, what lies at the heart of natural law is an understanding of morality. That's the essence of natural law. The essence of natural law is what is the objective difference between right and wrong? And then, are you going to use your will, your courage, your drive to choose willfully, once you know those differences between right and wrong behaviors? Are you willfully going to choose the right behavior over the wrong behavior by an act of your will, by an act of your own personal willpower? So the difference between right and wrong is actually very simple, and people want to make this into something more complex than it is and confuse people and just make it absolutely something that it doesn't need to be. It's so simple. We need to understand what right is by understanding what wrong is. See, rights are not well defined in the affirmative, in saying, well, this is a right, this is a right, this is a right. What you want to do is say, everything that is not a wrong is a right. So therefore, you need to know what is wrong action, what is wrong behavior. What is, when you do it, when you take this behavior or this action, it is a wrong. What do we mean by that? Okay? So what is meant by that is if you take a behavior and it affects someone else in a way that harms them, it harms their physical body, it harms their property, it defrauds them of something that you don't have a right to take from them, that's a wrongdoing. And that's as simple of a definition as can be given. Okay? So everything that is a right doesn't involve that type of behavior. Meaning, if we look at wrongdoings, we could define wrongdoings as certain types of behavior, certain types of actions. Well, if you look at the basic wrongdoings, there's murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, and coercion. All right, murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, and coercion. Just about every single wrong you could possibly think of is one of those forms of behavior. Now, people will say lying too. All right, that's deceiving someone, and yes, that is morally wrong. So you could add that in there. I consider lying a form of theft. You are stealing from someone their right to know what is true, what is accurate, and you're taking that or obscuring that from them. You're hiding it from them. So it's a form of theft. But if you really look at all the other forms of wrongdoing, okay, all these other behaviors that we could call wrongdoing, and we just look at them a little bit deeper, every single one of them is a form of theft. So murder, the theft of someone's life. Assault, the theft of someone's physical well-being. Rape, the theft of someone's free will to sexually associate with whom they choose. Murder, assault, rape, theft is the taking of physical property from someone that you don't own and have any lawful right to. Trespass, you're thieving or taking away someone's right to remain unharmed in their or unaccosted in their lair, in their living space. Coercion, you're thieving or taking someone's right to choose away, their free will right to choose for themselves, their behaviors away from them. So every one of these forms of wrongdoing, murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, and coercion, we could all boil them down. We could boil them all down and say that they are all forms of theft. In some form or fashion, you're committing theft. You're taking something which doesn't belong to you when you do these wrong actions. So in other words, theft is the one true form of wrongdoing. It's the one overarching wrongdoing that anybody can commit. And in order to understand theft, we need to understand property. Property is again, along with morality, it's the underlying basis for morality, and that's why it's called proper T. See, when you add T onto something, it means power, and usually power through the understanding of how something works, right? So really, in esoteric terms, in what you could call occult terms, the word property means the power of right. Literally, it means the power of right. And the T symbol, the letter T, is known as the Tau cross, T-A-U, and it was a symbol of power, of knowledge and power in the ancient world as a symbol. Now, property has everything to do with an understanding of natural law, because all wrongdoings are forms of theft. And therefore, all right action means if you take this behavior, it doesn't result in harm through theft, through taking something that doesn't belong to you to any other living beings. Wrong means if you do take this behavior, it results in harm to other living beings, and hence it's not in harmony with natural law, and you're going to receive chaos as a result of enacting it. When we choose right action over wrong action, we receive order as a manifested result. So to go back to property, people will have a hard time with this. See, most people in the world are either of left or right brain imbalance. This is a big part of the work that I talk about. Understanding brain balance has to do with an understanding of natural law. All right? The people who are super left-brained, they will have a hard time with natural law because they don't get the non-aggression principle. And they'll insist that you have to do these acts that are essentially acts of theft and wrongdoing to prevent chaos. You know, as ridiculous and nonsensical as that is, that's what these left-brain people believe because they don't understand the non-aggression principle. All right? The right-brain people oftentimes have a hard time with the self-defense principle of being able to use defensive force if your rights and property are coming under attack by someone else. All right? So, but also what right-brain people have a hard time with is the very concept of property. This is very critically important to understand when it comes to natural law. Because there are people out there who will say there's no such thing as property. It doesn't exist. See, what they lack is an understanding of the balance that has to come in understanding when it comes to this term, property. What they're thinking, what the right-brained among us are thinking, the right-brained and balanced among us are thinking, is that property means this wildly imbalanced connotation that a lot of people who are super left-brain think it means. A property to a person who's way out of balance in the left brain means I have to get as much as I can and keep acquiring and keep acquiring. And even if I prevent other people from having what they have the basic need for to survive, well, that's okay too, because I own this lawfully or legally. That's not property. That's called being such a hoarder and a totally imbalanced left brain hog, okay, that you have gone so deep into the left brain that you think everything belongs to you, or way more than what you can use on a daily basis is yours and belongs to you. See, it goes to this concept in the Lord's Prayer in the in the New Testament of give us this day our daily bread, meaning this day let us have the resources that we need to survive, and not hoard everything to a point where you're worried about what's going to happen 10 years from now. All right? That's not property. Saying, I'm going to own all the water in a country isn't a rightful way of looking at property. I don't care what the law in that country or any other says about somebody's rightful ability to own all the water in a country. No one has that right. Okay? Someone has the right to take the resources from the earth that they need to live on a daily basis in the form of food and water. Absolutely. That's your right. That's called property, meaning right, proper, right, and then the power within that right, meaning you are standing within that law, that right. Okay? So the right brain, again, to go back to this notion of property, the right-brained among us, the right-brained and balanced among us, have this distorted view of what property really is. And therefore they say, oh, it doesn't exist. And hey, you can't leave the world with anything, so you don't ever truly own anything. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I own my mind and body. I don't care whether I'm not leaving this world with them. Okay? I'm in possession of them now. Another thing people will have a hard time with is the word possession, because they'll liken it to demonic possession. There's many other forms of possession. The most important form of possession is property under natural law. Okay? So, they'll hear the word possession and that'll scare them. You can't liken property to possession just because you have a notion in your mind of what demonic possession is. Okay? We're not talking about the same thing here. I am in lawful possession of my mind and body. I am in lawful possession of the things that I use on a daily basis in my home. This is my property. The shirt that I'm wearing right now is my property. I'm using it. Okay? Property means you are in lawful possession of it. You didn't harm someone else to take it. Okay? And you're not hoarding so much of it that no one else has access to something that they need, like actual resources of life to be able to live. Okay? If someone manufactured on their own all of the, let's say microphones in the world, and they wanted to hoard them all and own them all, well, people don't need, for physical survival, microphones. Now, if the first person who ever invented the microphone invented a whole bunch of them and said, hey, I made all of these, they're mine. Well, that's their property. No one can go and say, hey, I own all the salt in the world. Well, salt is something people need for physical survival in daily life. No one can own all of it. No one can say, I own all of the energy in the world. I own the access to electricity. This is what power companies believe that they have the right to. I own all the water. I'll mete out water as I see fit. This isn't property. That's called a wrongful claim of property. Exactly. There is such a thing as a rightful property. And the hallmarks of this, the three essential hallmarks are, you are in lawful possession of it, you are using it, and you are maintaining responsibility for it. That's what defines property. All right? And that's real. That exists. I'm in lawful possession of my body. I didn't harm anybody to take possession of my body. Okay? My consciousness is in possession of this physical vehicle that we call the 3D body. Therefore, I own it. Okay? I am using it. My consciousness is using my body right now. So no one else has the right to just come over and lop off a limb because I'm using those limbs. I'm using my body, and you don't have a right to cause harm to me in that capacity. And I'm responsible for it. What I do, I am wholly responsible for what I do with this vehicle called the body. Therefore, I am in possession of it. My consciousness, my spirit possesses this physical vehicle. I'm in possession of it. I own it. It is my property. That's what we have to understand as property. And that can extend to physical things too. I own this computer I'm talking to you through. I own it. It is my possession. It is possessed by me. It does not possess me. I'm not attached to the physical things I own. See, that's the other part of this. The right brain will see all forms of property as forms of attachment. And that's not true either. That's not true. And, I really, this is a great opportunity here in this interview because I've never really deeply elaborated on this concept before like this. So, I'm glad we went into this here because this is something to really clarify things in the minds of many people when it comes to this. Property is so essential to understand when it comes to natural law that it cannot be overstated. So, going back to this right brain view of property that's completely off, they think that it means attachment, okay? Property doesn't have to mean attachment. I'm certainly attached to my physical body. I mean, hey, without it, I won't be able to do much here, okay? Certainly won't be able to teach people about natural law, all right? But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm so attached in ego to physical life that I'm not going to teach natural law at a time where, hey, down the line it may very well get me killed. I'm not attached to life that much. I'm not attached to this body that much. I'm going to do what's right regardless of what happens to the physical flesh. Okay? The other aspect of this concept of imbalance when it comes to understanding property amongst the right-brained imbalanced individuals is, when they talk about it as attachment, is to own property. For me to own a computer or a bicycle or a phone or a hard drive or a sound recording board or a printer doesn't mean that those things have to be my identity. They're not my identity. I don't have to be so attached to them that I think of them as they're me. They define who I am. I'm not attached to them. My possessions don't own me. I own them. I use them. They are servants for what I need to do in life. And I don't try to accrue and hoard so much that I can't even put it to use. I acquire what I need to use, to put to use and affect things in the world in a positive way to the extent that I can, and I use them. I don't buy excessive things that I don't need, that I don't use. I have what I use. That's property, okay? And, I believe it was the Islamic teacher, I think his name was Ali Talib, if I'm not mistaken, if I have the name right, Ali Talib. He said that detachment is not that you should own nothing, but that nothing should own you.
Brilliant.
Think about that. I mean, that's brilliant.
That is excellent.
That's what detachment is. Detachment is that nothing owns you. That's what independence means. You're not owned. You're not enslaved by something. I'm not enslaved by my physical possessions. I own them. I possess them. I put them to use.
Sorry, Mark.
Yeah,
if you want to be free, obviously, you can't let anything be attached to anything. You got to be willing to kind of almost drop everything and go at any time, kind of thing. So, obviously, if you're in the situation where your things are keeping you where you are, then you're not really free, are you?
No, you are owned by something else, and that's the whole thing. What natural law is about is definitively knowing and understanding that which you own and that which you do not own. That's what natural law is about, because if you understand that, you will not take that which you know is not yours. You will not attempt to take that which you know does not belong to you. So let's look at forms of property, connecting them to right behavior and natural law. Life is property. The life of another being is property. It's theirs. It's their property. My life is my property. Your life is your property. Other beings' life is their property. And this means humans, animals, non-human beings, everything. All beings in the universe own themselves. They are sovereign beings who own themselves. Whether people think that that's true or not, that's eternally true. The universe, all beings in the universe are on one level, sovereign. That's it. Everything else is an illusion. Everything else is something that someone believes erroneously, like slavery. So, people will have a hard time with this because, one, they think there's authority vested in man called government, which doesn't exist. I mean, of course, the practices of government exist, but when I say it doesn't exist, I mean it's inherently illegitimate. Authority does not exist in man. Therefore, the notion of government is inherently illegitimate. It's an inherently illegitimate concept that is only really truly exists in the mind. It doesn't exist in nature. All right? Property exists in nature. I am in possession of my body and the things that I use. That's real. That's real, physical, tangible things. That's why it's inherent, meaning it exists in nature. Authority does not exist in nature. That is a mental construct that is built on an erroneous idea. Erroneous meaning it's completely false, it's untrue, and it has no basis in reality or truth. So, to go back to property, life is property. So, therefore, don't take the life of other beings. You don't have a right to take other beings' life. Now, again, there's situations where you acquire the right to put down the life of another being if they are trying to take yours, or they are coming at your rights, and they've been told and warned, don't do this, stop, desist from your actions, they will not do that, and then you have a right to physically defend yourself with the physical use of force up to and including deadly force in certain scenarios. Okay? Setting that to the side for a moment, we're talking about initiating violence or the initiatory use of force against your fellow beings. That's always wrong behavior. So taking life that's someone else's property, if you do it, you've stolen. And that includes animals. Okay? Another form of property is rights. Rights are birthright. See, rights is actually a shortened term. It's a birthright, an inheritance. See, and inheritance comes from inherent. Inheritance. Inherent means of nature. Rights are in nature. They are an inheritance or a birthright of the creator of the universe. Because man didn't make right and wrong either. See, this is another thing. Moral relativism postulates, and again, this is part of Satanism, moral relativism, one of the tenets of it, postulates that rights, the concept of right and wrong, only exists in the mind of human beings. We have made up those notions. That's what Satanists believe. And what I'm trying to explain to people is right and wrong have nothing to do with human perception. All we can do is align our perception to those inherent truths that exist in nature. If every human being was wiped off the face of the earth, right and wrong would still exist in nature. Because it's an ability to do an action in the 3D world that results in harm or does not result in harm. That still exists. Okay? And the laws that govern it still exist whether we are here or not. It's very difficult for most people to understand that. They'll rebel against that till the day they die. Because, see, part of it is they don't want natural law to be true. That's what we're really up against here is what Satanism really is. To tie this back to this, for people who are really hearing what I'm saying and understanding it, you'll understand how this ties back to Satanism. A Satanist wants to be God. That's what they want. They want to be the creator. They want to usurp the creator of the universe's role in the universe. They want to make up the law. They want their word to be law, which is what the creator of the universe did with this entire construct that we call the universe or the multiverse or whatever we want to call it. The universe was spoken into existence by through sound, which brought forth vibratory energy in the form of matter, and laws were put into effect to govern that creation. That's what natural law is. You could look at it as the boundary conditions that govern behavior in the three-dimensional universe, the 3D world. Okay? So those are the boundary conditions. And then we were also, as beings, as sovereign beings, meaning that we are all on the same level and no one owns anybody else, truly, inherently owns anybody else. They'll make claims that they do, but it's always illegitimate claims. We were given free will. See, this is the other thing. Imbalanced people toward the left or the right brain. The left brain don't believe free will exists, don't believe natural law exists in many. We are gifted with it, and we can use it to choose right action or wrong action. And then we receive the consequences of that choice through natural law. So free will absolutely exists. And this is what people have to grasp, that we're dealing with a deterministic component to reality, to creation, which is natural law, which cannot be changed. And then we're dealing with a randomness aspect to reality, which is free will, which we have the power to choose how we will behave within those parameters. So yes, there's both of these things. There's the deterministic component, and then there's the random component called free will. And the balancing act between those dynamics gives us the manifestation that we experience in the world. And we have to understand both of those components are real, they're inherent to creation, they exist, and we're constantly working with those two forces. So to go back to property, life is property, rights are property, and no one has the right to stop someone from taking an action that is a right. This is what the whole police state is all about. We're going to say what actions you can do and cannot do. You know, we're going to tell you that you can do this and you can't do this. It doesn't matter whether you have a right to do it. It doesn't matter whether the action harms nobody else. If we say that we don't approve of it, you can't do it. And that's playing God. And that, again, this goes back to the notion that people want to believe that man's law can be based in moral relativism and still somehow be a right, still somehow be acceptable morally, that it's quote unquote, if it's legal, it's lawful. Okay? Nothing could be further from the truth. When we realize that all of man's law is based in moral relativism, because it's not based in natural law. It's not based on, is this action a right for one person to do, or is it a wrong for one person to do? Well, if it's right for one person, it's right for all people. If it's wrong for one person, it's wrong for all people. That's not how the laws of man work. There's all kinds of special, dispensations and, special scenarios and, in this instance, this is okay. Over this state line, this is okay. And on the other side of the state line, it's punishable by a lengthy prison sentence. This is all moral relativism. All morally relative. That's what man's law is based in, which is proof that it's satanic. Man's law is based in satanic ideology because it's based in moral relativism. Only natural law is real. Essentially, man's law is an illusion that exists in the mind. This is part of the paradigm shift. Just like authority is an illusion that exists in the mind, since all of man's law is based on the concept of authority, all of it's fake. All of it's an illusion. It doesn't matter whether it's a common law court, an admiralty court, all of it's an illusion. There is no such thing as authority. There is no such thing as authority vested in human beings. There is only natural law. This is what people have to get to. And that means, once you understand that, the only people who are truly dealing with reality are anarchists. Anybody that believes in the concept of authority vested in man in any form, it doesn't matter how minimalistic, it doesn't matter for what purpose you're using that quote-unquote authority. It's all an illusion. The person's under mind control, and it doesn't exist in nature. This is what getting out of the matrix means. setting aside the notion that these artificial world constructs that only exist in a diseased psyche are real. They're not real. It's like saying I believe in purple unicorn monkey hybrids that fly in the sky over Los Angeles. Well, that's not real. It doesn't exist in this dimension or probably any other. Okay? So to believe in that is to believe in illusion. It's the same thing with authority. It's the same thing with government. It's the same thing with all of man's law, no matter how minarchist it is. It's all fake. It's all based in illusion. The only reality is anarchy. That's it. There is no other reality. It is the truth of nature. Nature is anarchy. In and of itself, the actual condition we are always living in is anarchy. And the word, again, people don't understand the word. Anarchy comes from Greek. A or an, the prefix means without or not present. And archon in Greek, which is where the root arch in anarchy comes from. Archon means master or ruler, as in a master who owns and rules over slaves, or a king who rules over subjects, a ruler who rules over subjects that he owns. Okay, that's what it means. So putting them together, anarchy means without rulers or masters. No masters present, no rulers present, meaning that there is no master and slave relationship. There are no masters, there are no slaves. Everybody's on equal footing as sovereigns. And the word sovereign, people don't know what that. Again, anarchy doesn't mean without rules. There's always rules because there's always natural law that is binding, omnipresent, and immutable. Okay? Non-man-made, binding, and immutable laws that govern the consequences of behavior. That's always in effect at all places in the universe. You can never take that out of effect. So there are always rules that there are consequences for either living in harmony with or living in opposition to. That will always exist and can never not exist. So anarchy doesn't mean without rules. It means without rulers, meaning without masters and slaves, meaning freedom. The word anarchy literally equates to freedom. Anarchy equals freedom at all times and places, always has meant freedom, means freedom now, always will mean freedom, regardless of what anybody thinks it means or has meant. That's what the word actually means. That's the real definition of the word. If I had to give you a one-word definition of anarchy, it is freedom. That's it. Real freedom is anarchy. Anarchy is real freedom. So another word people don't understand is sovereign. Sovereign means from the Latin super, S-O-V-E-R, V, and in classical Latin there was no V. So if we take that back etymologically, it's going to render as a P or a B in classical Latin. So S-O-V-E-R, the first part of sovereign, is super in Latin, S-U-P-E-R. Okay? And, we look at this in things like, your name's superb. Superb. Super, it means beyond. When something is superb, it means it goes beyond. It's above and beyond. It's superb. It's great. So right there, that tells us the meaning of the word. Super means above or beyond. Okay? And then the second part of the word in sovereign, reign, comes from the Latin regnum. Okay? Regnum means rulership, actually. It comes from the other Latin noun, rex regis, which means king. Okay? So a king or a regent is a ruler, okay, who makes the law, okay? And then his rulership in his so-called authority and him being the maker of the law, him being God, is called his rulership. That's regnum in Latin. It's where we get the English word reign from, R-E-I-G-N, which is the second part of sovereign. So we put these root words together. Super regnum, sovereign, above rulership. Okay, meaning you're not subject to a ruler. You're not subject to a master. You're your own master. You're your own ruler. You're your own owner. You own yourself. You own your consciousness. You own your body. You own, your life and your rights. That's what sovereign means. Nobody else owns those things. Nobody else can make a legitimate claim to them because I own those things. Those are my property. My life is my property. My rights are my property. My freedom is my property. And, this is what natural law is in a nutshell. I go into it much deeper in my podcast and on my seminar in natural law and give many examples. But in a nutshell, natural law is about morality, is about the understanding of the objective difference between right and wrong behavior, and then the consequences for enacting for our free will choice between certain behaviors, whether it is in harmony with natural law, meaning right, or in opposition to natural law, meaning wrong behavior. And it has everything to do with property, with the understanding of property. That's how you know what you own and what you don't own, and that's how you know whether your behavior is theft or whether it is not theft. That's what natural law is in as simple a way as I can break it down in the time that we have allotted to us here today.
Okay. I would just like to ask Mark regarding one that you done on the Matrix, decoding the Matrix. Obviously, a lot of movies, have messages in them, codes and things like that. But
right.
Just wanted you just to talk a little bit about the Matrix, really,
Sure.
about what you think about it. And
Absolutely. You could check out on my website on the videos section. I've done a couple of videos on allegories, and this is another word that a lot of people don't know about or haven't heard specifically. It's not a word that is talked about in general colloquial English and conversational English. The word allegory, Allegory, it means a story, a poem, even a picture or some type of symbol that is something that is veiled. It's conveying a veiled message. So it looks like one thing or it sounds like one thing, but really it's being told or conveyed to someone to teach an underlying moral lesson of some kind. So let's, take for example, some of the parables that are taught in biblical accounts. They're not meant to be taken literally. You're meant to see what happened in the parable, in the interaction between these characters, and then you're supposed to relate it through relational thinking to events that are going on in real life, in everyday real life, in the modern time. So a parable isn't time-bound. It's an eternal story. It's a story that deals with eternal truths about morality. And hence, it's an allegory. And that's what an allegory is. You're teaching a veiled message. Because the ostensible purpose for encoding something into an allegory is that the person that you may be trying to teach may be largely unteachable. That they're in such a deplorable mental condition, a deplorable spiritual condition, a deplorable psychological condition, a deplorable moral condition, that they cannot receive readily the message that you are speaking to them. My work is non-allegorical. It's quite blunt, right in your face, because the purpose of my work, and I've tried to explain this to people. Many people think I'm trying to reach out to every person. I am not. And I've really never made any bones about that and never tried to make people think I was doing anything different than this. I am not trying to reach out to the lowest common denominator of human being and change their worldview. Okay? I've never set out to do that. I speak forcefully, bluntly, unapologetically, without any sugarcoating to other adults and what I would say people who are well on their way to true adulthood, who have already partially begun on this path to truth. And I do not encode my message, and I do not water down or sugarcoat my message for people who cannot take it straight. This is medicine that I am giving straight to people without dilution. So I don't care what anybody thinks of what I have to say. Okay? I am doing this to reach out to people who are already partially well and have a partial ability to comprehend the message integrate it into their own life, and then act upon it and help others to understand it. So you could say the goal of all of my teachings is to teach other potential teachers. I am not trying to teach the average, asleep, completely egoically calcified golem. I don't claim that I can do that. I've never made the claim that I am capable of doing that. Which is why I'm saying the people who have those subtle sensibilities and the type of patience that is required to teach people like that, maybe I will reach them with this message. They will come online and awake to a much fuller level and extent through my message that they can bear, that they can take, and then they will go on to help some of those other people awaken, because I am not the teacher of those other types of people that I just referred to. I'm not it. That's not me. Never has been, probably is never going to be, and I've never made the claim that I'm trying to teach those type of people. I'm trying to teach other potential teachers, and always have been. So my message is non-allegorical. For the people who have a hard time receiving a message of truth and morality, artists, philosophers, storytellers have encoded their teachings, again, into tales, stories, poems, fables, images, movies, etc. These are generally known as allegories. Allegories are coded messages. The Matrix is one of them. Okay, it's a science fiction movie. That's the outside layer that you have to get past and realize, hey, this isn't just a science fiction movie. The people who made this are trying to tell me about what's going on in the real world, cleverly disguised as a science fiction story. But really, they're telling you deep underlying truths, significant truths about what's going on in the world. Okay? And that's what the Matrix is. So very briefly, I know we only have a few minutes left, but briefly, the Matrix is about three things. Okay? Each movie covers a different overall topic. The first movie, the Matrix 1, okay, is about what is the control system that we are stuck in as a species. What is it? Okay? What is its nature? How does it work? Okay? Its nature is control. Its nature is slavery. It works based on mind control and illusion, keeping the mind in an illusory state. That's what the whole first movie of The Matrix is about. The movie answers the question, what is the nature of the problem that humanity faces in the modern day, in the modern era? And it answers that. It says right in the Matrix 1 movie, when it answers the question, what is the Matrix? What is the answer to that question? Control. The Matrix is control. It is the control system that has been pulled over your eyes to prevent you from seeing the truth that we have been enslaved as a species. That's what Morpheus is telling the hero character Neo. Now, it answers that question about what is the nature of this system. It's control. And it answers the question also, how is that system preserved and propagated? How does it work? It works through keeping people's mind in an illusory state, which they call the Matrix. They're seeing images projected into the mind. The physiology is being kept alive on, this fluid substance. They're in these egg-like things, in like wombs, that are stacked on top of each other for as far as the eye can see. So this is the people who are under mind control. They're kept in a sheltered reality, fed illusion to keep them acting as a battery, which propagates the control system. Mind control, illusion, believing in things that aren't real, like authority and government and man's law. All illusions to keep the control system going. That's what the first movie is about. The second movie answers another question. It answers the question about causality. Why are we even in this system to begin with? What happened such that this system became present the way that it is? What did that? Why are we where we are at as a species? Why are we in the prison that we are in? Why? Because if you don't have the answer to that question, you have no power. You certainly have no power to affect change. You have to know the underlying causal factors. So what this movie is getting at is if you don't understand the causal nature of the condition that you are in, you are powerless to change the condition that you are in. You're stuck in it forever. And the answer to that question is humanity does not understand natural law. It doesn't understand its free will decisions that affect the aggregate quality through behavior of an entire society. Our behavior does that. That's the causal factor. In turn, the causal factors for behavior are our decision-making processes, and in turn, the causal factor for our decision-making mental processes that we then choose behaviors through, the causal factors for those decision-making processes in the mind is the availability of information, which we use to ultimately build our minds, and then this information, the actual knowledge that we have or don't have affects our decisions, which affects our behavior, which builds our reality. The manifested reality that we then must experience. That's how our reality is essentially constructed. So the Matrix 2 movie, The Matrix Reloaded, explains to us the causal factors for the human condition. And that causality is everything. It's the root cause of what's going on in the world. We have to understand causality, and that's natural law. You could call natural law the laws of causality, the laws of cause and effect. So they're explaining natural law kind of in a nutshell, allegorically, in the second Matrix movie. In the third movie, this movie is about what is required on the part of humanity in order to get out of this control system. And it's the most uncomfortable information. It's why most people don't like this movie. Most people don't like the second and third movies of The Matrix, and they will cite that they think it's cinematically not as good of a movie, that it focused too much on the effects, the special effects, the fight scenes, etc. I don't really believe that is the case why people don't like it, at least not at a subconscious level. Okay? At a conscious level, that's what people are saying why they don't prefer the second and third Matrix movies to the first. I was the same. When I first watched it, I did not understand the allegory the first time I watched the whole trilogy. And when I saw the second one, I was a little bit disappointed. I didn't feel it measured up to the first. Now I think the second one is just absolutely brilliant and is probably the best of the movies, those three. But when I first saw it, I didn't understand it, and I thought this wasn't as good as the first. And then when I saw the third, I really didn't understand what they were getting at with that, allegorically, and I hated the third one. Now I love them because I truly understand the allegory of what they're saying, and it's so spiritually profound and powerful if you understand it and can decode it. To go back to the concept, or to just stay on this for one moment, people subconsciously don't resonate with the message of the second and third movies because they don't want it to be true. See, they don't want causality, the understanding of causality and natural law to be true. Again, they want to be God. They want to be the arbiters of truth. They want to be the people who say, well, it works like this because I believe it works like this. Folks, what I'm telling you, I don't believe it works like I'm saying. That's not what I believe. That's not my belief system. Natural law is not a belief system. It's not my belief system. I didn't invent this. I didn't, come up with this system. It's not a construct of the mind. It's not a philosophy. I mean, living according to it is, yes, it's a philosophy, but natural law is a science that exists in nature that you either understand or you don't. All you can do with natural law is discover its presence. It's saying that natural law is a belief system or a religion would be like saying gravity is a belief system or a religion. Same thing, no different. How insane would somebody be if you asked them, hey, how insane would somebody sound if they asked the question, hey, do you believe in gravity? Do you believe gravity's in effect here on Earth? I mean, you look at them and say, somebody needs to commit you, dude. You know? You need to go into the mental hospital now because there's something broken upstairs. I mean, that's how insane it would be for somebody to say natural law is a belief system. It's called law for a reason. It's not a belief system, it's law. You don't have any choice whether to believe in it or not. You have the choice whether to believe in it or not, but that's not going to affect its presence. You could choose to believe in gravity all you want. Good luck stepping over that cliff saying, I don't believe in gravity. You know, enjoy what you're going to get on the other side of that decision. You know, but you're still going to be bound by it. That's what natural law is. So people don't want that to be true, and that's why subconsciously they hate the second and third Matrix movies. It's telling them such profound spiritual truths. The mind, the ego, wants to reject it out of hand. So the ego is saying, oh no, that can't be true. I don't want that to be true. That's not true. Okay? And it's saying, I don't want to hear these profound truths. So I'll just, convert that into saying, I hate this movie. You're not really listening to the movie. You're paying attention to the effects, not the underlying spiritual truths that are being conveyed through the allegory. Again, The Matrix is not a science fiction movie. The Matrix is a movie about how the universe works and how our decision-making processes works with those natural laws. The third movie of The Matrix gets into what is it going to take on the part of humanity to get out of the matrix of control. And that's the most disparaging part of the whole trilogy, because it bluntly explains to people it's going to take an enormity of will and persistence to get out of this situation. It is not going to be done by wishing it away. It is not going to be done by sitting in a lotus position, meditating, that it go away. It is not going to be done by, being an armchair quarterback and telling other people what they should do. It's not going to be done by, fast blasting a couple of emails out to people and saying my work is done. I've told people what's going on through a couple of emails. Okay, that's not what it's going to take. It's going to take one totally restructuring the way you yourself think, which is the hardest work there is to do. Once you've done that, that's not the beginning of the work. I mean, that's not the end of the work, that's the beginning of the work. Now you have to influence other people to go through that same paradigm shift that you went through, which was painful and a trudging, laborious process in many cases. I know at least it was for me. Some people wake up more quickly than others. For me it took well over 8 to 10 years. I would say once the process got started, I would say 7 or 8 years. That's a long time to suffer and to keep having to say, I was wrong about this, I was wrong about that, I was wrong about that. That's a long time to go through a process of self-discovery and breaking down the old self to rebuild something that is based in truth. Painful. Okay? Most people don't want to do that. They want to run away from themselves. They don't want to go through that process, because it is a painful process. It's going to be much more painful not to do it, though. But the third movie gets into the way out of the Matrix is through painstaking persistence. That's why the fight scene, he's fighting the evil force, the virus within the system of control, the Smith character that represents, decay and involution and the entropy that's going against order and creating more chaos in our lives. The Neo character has to willfully, against all odds, fight determinedly, persistently, and even when it looks like he can't win and he's being driven into the ground, the Smith character looks at him and he says, why do you keep getting up? Why do you keep fighting me? And the answer that comes back out of the hero's mouth, out of Neo's mouth, because I choose to. Free will. See, willpower, determination, persistence, the masculine aspect, the driving force that will never stop, will never quit, will never relinquish, will never give up. That's what this movie conveys is going to be required if we're going to get out of this control situation, if we're going to get out of this human condition called slavery. And that's why that movie is highly unpopular. Not because people don't like it, its cinematography or, the way the scenes were put together. At a subconscious level, they hate the message because the message isn't giving them this fairy tale notion of how change is created. The message is that hard to swallow red pill that is telling you the ugly truth and never promised you anything else about how we're going to have to get out of this situation that we have worked ourselves into. So that's how I see the Matrix trilogy, and if people want to see more of my decoding of this brilliant spiritual allegory, you could check that out in the video section of my website at whatonearthishappening.com.
Brilliant. That's amazing.
Many of our listeners will already be familiar with your work, but what's the best way for them to find more of your stuff, whether it be through social networks, YouTube, or obviously your own website you've just mentioned?
Sure. Yes, my website is whatonearthishappening.com. There's a huge body of knowledge there in the form of videos, podcasts, resources, etc. I highly recommend that people start with the podcast. Go to the audio podcast section and go back to number 1. There's 3 pages of podcasts up there. Go back to number 1, okay, because they're in reverse chronological order. And listen in order from number 1 forward without skipping, okay? If you do that, because they're laid out in a linear and logically oriented tapestry, so that it gives you the building blocks, the simple building blocks in the first ones, and then it builds up information on top of that. The prior information is prerequisite knowledge, so don't skip around. Listen to it in order. If you listen to those in order all the way through at your own pace, at your own leisure, at your own convenience, okay? If you do that, an entire new worldview will open up to you, and you will see the illusion that you've been living in your whole life. I also highly recommend the natural law videos, which are at the top of my video section. The seminar, the 3-part seminar that I gave late last year in Connecticut, at New Haven, Connecticut, on natural law. I would recommend having the podcast as a foundational framework before even getting into that. But if you're really going to watch nothing else or listen to nothing else on my website, my recommendation is, if you only have limited amount of time and you don't want to go through the whole podcast, please check out those 3 videos on natural law all the way through, from beginning to end. It's about 8.5 hours or so of material, but again, you can listen in chunks, but listen to all 3, watch all 3 of those videos. And again, it's a tremendous eye-opening experience for people who have not been exposed to that information previously. So that's my website. You could also check me out on YouTube at youtube.com/whatonearth93, the number 93. What on Earth, the number 93, all together. What on Earth 93. youtube.com/whatonearth93. That's my YouTube channel. If you want to check me out on Facebook, I don't usually give this out, but I'll give it out today since you brought up Facebook. My Facebook is What on Earth altogether. Last name is Happening altogether. So the words What on Earth with no spaces between them as the first name, and the last name is Happening with no space in between as the last name. That's my Facebook page. So if you want to friend me on Facebook, feel free to do so.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, for agreeing to come on our show, and it's been an absolute pleasure. What do you think, Diamond?
Before we go, Mark, you were talking about, your work is kind of building up to make teachers, and hopefully, we can have some more leaders like yourself. So who would you say have inspired you over the years?
So many people. It would be difficult to even name them all. I'll throw out some names, and I'll always probably leave people out that should be included here. But
Yeah.
David Icke's been a tremendous influence of mine, not only for his incredible amounts of information that he has put forward, but for his persistence and courage. If people had the courage of that man, regardless of what anybody thinks of him or his information, if people had the courage that he puts forward through his work and his persistence, the world would be free overnight. I love Jordan Maxwell for his studies of the occult and his very blunt approach and delivery. Always loved his blunt approach and delivery, and I like to think that my delivery style is a little bit patterned after his. And I have no intention of ever changing that. I like the way I present and deliver. I'm not trying to present. Again, people who are hearing this, please understand, I don't try to present for the delicate and those with delicate sensibilities. If you want to reach out to those people, you go right ahead. I'm not interested in that. I'm teaching people who are, again, already partially adult and can handle it. In other words, I'm giving the real material for strong people. Because they're the people who are going to go out and change the world, not the namby-pamby, wishy-washy, milk toasters. All right? Yep. I'm not interested in milk toast people. I'm interested in real human beings with willpower, courage, and true care. Okay? And they want the knowledge. That's who I'm speaking to and addressing as adults and human beings, and I'm being straightforward with them and blunt and non-apologetic. And I think the people who are in that mindset understand that. Okay? For other people who may hear and the message resonates with them, that's great if they come on board with it. Wonderful. Then it's an added bonus. But I'm trying to teach other teachers. Let's go back to your question with who else do I really resonate with as far as teachers go. I always liked William Cooper, another unapologetic, straightforward teacher. And he was murdered for it. Always love Michael Tessarion. I think Michael Tessarion is one of the best teachers out there in the modern day. His work is so prolific, it's incredible. I mean, it's just a lifetime labor of love. That's all I can say about Michael's work. And he's absolutely who I consider one of my mentors.
You actually sound quite a lot like him, to be honest.
I'll take that as a high compliment.
Yeah, you do.
I love Terence McKenna. I mean, a lot of people talk about, well, he, talked about certain things like population control, and he, didn't believe in the conspiracy thing. And some people think he was an agent of intelligence agencies, and maybe he was for a time. I think the information he put forward on consciousness and psychedelics in particular was very valuable to me in my awakening process. So regardless of, hey, you could say I worked with dark occult groups. That doesn't mean I can't put information out there that's very valuable and transformative, and I feel that's what McKenna did during his years. I think he came out of the associations that he may have developed earlier in his life and didn't want to develop those anymore and go along with that, and he started speaking very vocally, and I think he was a great teacher. I don't agree with 100% of everything he says, nor do I agree with 100% of what anybody else says. We all have to take what resonates with us, work with it, integrate it, take an integral approach, and who else? Larkin Rose. I love Larkin Rose, who's right here in Pennsylvania. His work is just brilliant. I think everybody should read The Most Dangerous Superstition. I think it's probably the most important book that anybody could read in the modern day. I love Jeremy Locke's work with the book The End of All Evil. Just one of the most brilliant books ever written as far as I'm concerned. Who else? There's just so many. I mean, I like what Bob Tuskin's been doing with his work. Bob got me involved in internet radio. I personally like Alex Jones's persistence. A lot of people will say things about him too. Oh, he's an agent of this and that. How many people are putting out work as prolific as that?
Yeah, that's true.
Pumping out the type of bandwidth that he's pumping out, and the various websites. I mean, that's persistence. That's dedication. That's making this your life. And hey, that costs money to do. He's recouping it. I have no problem with that. Like I said, I could go on and on and on and talk about tons of research. Manly P. Hall. I mean, Manly P. Hall, look at that body of knowledge right there. Just unbelievable amount of work in the esoteric realms. you know, putting out things like The Secret Teachings of All Ages, all of his lectures, hundreds of hours of lecture series that he's put forward, sharing his knowledge. Just brilliant. And you know, many others, but those are the people who've largely inspired my work and who I look at as mentors personally.
That's great.
They just want to give a shout out to one of our listeners, Ian M, who actually was the one that suggested to bring yourself, Mark, on as a guest, and he did have a few questions, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it for maybe in the future,
sure.
At, a convenient time that, if you're available, maybe come on again. We'd really be grateful.
Sure. That would be perfect. We could do,
yeah.
If you want to amass some more questions from others, maybe we could do a whole question and answer type show. I like things like that. So yeah, let's set that up for another time. Sure.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's really great of you. Well, thanks again for everything, Mark. It's been an excellent show, and I've really just been sitting back buzzing just with all the information you've been giving us and our listeners. What do you reckon, Diamond?
Oh, absolutely, totally agree. And it's been amazing listening to you, Mark, and you keep up the great work, and would love to have you back on again.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, you continue the great work as well. I appreciate what you guys are doing, and stay with it. Persistence is the key.
Certainly will.
When we do that, we'll come out of this on the other end to a new and better world. So I want to thank you, gentlemen, and thanks for having me on, and sure, we could do this again very soon.
Thanks very much.
Thanks again, Mark. Thank you.